Shalom. This is Nizama Shal Hamadabar Yasharal on my channel, Nizama, the Hebrew Mystic Healer. Before I get started and introduce my special guest today, as always, I'd like to show some love to my 3D kin, the 12 tribes of Israel scattered to the four corners of this three-dimensional earth plane of existence. Much love and shalom to you all. And I would also like to show some love to my cosmic kin scattered to the 12 dimensions of this 12 dimensions of this cosmic egg. Shalom to you as well. And as always, show some appreciation to my viewers, especially those of you who are subscribed. If you're not yet subscribed, please do so now, and don't forget to hit the notification bell. So today I have a very special guest here with me today. Her name is Keyia. She has a healing center called the Inadu Healing Center, and she has had an amazing dream recently. Well, actually not too recently. It was about 3 years ago, right, Keyia?
2
years ago. Okay, 2 years ago. And she had a dream that really echoed and confirmed a lot of what myself and others who consider ourselves to be from the Anunnaki line have been experiencing. And so to me, it was like a great confirmation. Her and I have had some really good discussions, and we've talked about topics like shamanism and healing and importance of ancestors. And I just felt that she was a well of knowledge, and I wanted to have her on my show. So thank you so much for being here today, Keyia. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
So Keyia, what's on your mind today? What do you feel like talking about? I know we were going to cover the dream, and you're going to talk about your interpretation of that. I know you're going to talk about your healing center a little bit, but what's really on your mind? Like, what do you want to say to folks today?
I really want to encourage people to stay focused. I feel like that's the primary message, because there's a lot of chaos around us right now, and we are going through historical times and we're going through powerful times. It's definitely time to buckle down, and I feel like return to our roots and just stay the course, because things are going to even out, you know?
Absolutely. I'm with you on that. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the importance of connecting with our ancestors. I know you and I were having a private conversation about that the other day, and we were both talking about how we feel that we may have touched on it a little here and there in our channels, but we haven't really had a chance to really dive into it the way we wanted to. So maybe now's that opportunity. Like, what would you like to kind of address on the line of that topic? Because I know we were talking about how important it was. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think one of the important things to address is like the misconception of it, or people's, I guess, assumptions about it. And a lot of people think that it's about worshiping your ancestors, and it's really not. It's about veneration. It's about remembering them. They are your DNA. They came before you. They lived before you. When you forget about them, you are leaving out valuable knowledge. And as indigenous people, that knowledge it's imperative for our survival. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of the things that we're dealing with, people want to blame on so many other things, when it's really because we've lost our roots. And it's important to go back to those roots and take a few minutes out your day to thank those that came before you and invoke their knowledge, invoke their wisdom, invoke their love and their guidance in your life. It's very important, and it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't mean that you can't practice whatever religion that you choose to practice. It really doesn't mean anything outside of you taking the time to acknowledge those that came before you. I feel like people make it such a huge thing when it's really not, but it's powerful.
Yeah,
It's small thing to do, but it's very powerful. And we need their guidance. We need their help. We need their assistance, especially in times like right now. It's more important than ever for, I'm just going to keep using the word indigenous, but you know whether you are or not. I feel like it's more important than ever for us to call on those ancestors, venerate them, pour our libations, make our offerings, express our gratitude, and allow them to avenge themselves for the things that have happened to them. It's going to happen whether you do so or not. But it's important for you to be on the good side of that, and to get what's coming to you by way of your lineage. And so, yeah, I think that it's just important for people to stop acting like it's a religion when it's really not. It's a practice. It's a ritual.
Would you say that in the past, if we go back far enough, because I know for me, this is kind of like what I've been shown within like my own records and just kind of some things that have come to me over time, but like, it's okay if you don't agree, but like, would you say that at some point, if we go back far enough, everything really began with ancestors and ancestral powers and totemic powers within the DNA? Because that's really what I sense. Like, if we go back far enough, everything really just goes back to bloodline and family and community and the, you know, for lack of a better word, egregore or hive mind kind of power behind that lineage. So I was wondering, like, what do you think about that?
It's true. It's true. That's the reason why we were colonized and destroyed. That's the reason your language is taken away, the reason your culture is taken away, because you're all of a sudden powerless when you don't have your bloodline, when you don't have knowledge of where you come from, of your ancestors, of what things they did, of what things they were masters of, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on about that, but we won't for, you know, time's sake. When you lose all of that and you get put into some melting pot culture where now you're American, or now you're, you know, Central American or South American or whatever you are, you fall into this like a category, and you're supposed to forget everything behind you, and it causes insanity. I don't care what anybody else says. That's the way I view it, because you have no footing. It makes people just weird to have no culture or anything behind you, and so. But it feeds white supremacy. Let's just say that, because if you're not holding on to your power, if you're not holding on to, okay, my ancestors were masters of, I don't know, let's just say my ancestors were masters of hunting or whatever, and they provided food for people for miles and miles out, and I know that's what my family did for years and years and years. When that's wiped away from me and I'm colonized, then I no longer have that to hold on to. And if someone comes and tells me I'm a slave, then that's what I believe. If someone comes and tells me, well, your people are nothing, or you're this or you're that, because I don't know who I am and where I come from, I believe them. And that's a big problem for us. It's a big problem for us.
And it's I'm actually surprised, honestly, on my channel, I haven't received a lot of pushback from it yet. Well, then again, I do turn my comments off, because I feel like if I'm putting something out there, I'm not putting it out there to debate with people. Like, it either aligns with them or it doesn't. I'm not on there, you know, to have debates. But I'm actually surprised that I haven't received more like pushback, because I've been kind of calling that out, you know, how there is going to be a reckoning, how people want to talk about on karma on one hand, but then when it comes to their own bloodline, their own ancestors, they want to disassociate and disconnect from that, you know, as though they are somehow exempt from what their ancestors did, when we are in fact our ancestors. We are ancestors because we're part of that bloodline and we're connected to that tree. So it's a literal as above, so below, as within, so without principle, but also we incarnate through our own ancestry as well, you know, not just down here on earth, but even in the cosmic realms. And so I feel like a lot of the new age or starseed communities these days are really focused on kind of creating just a newer, you know, alien type religion, you know, that really is doing kind of the same thing that a lot of the mainstream religions have been doing for several thousands of years now. Yeah. And that is to disconnect us from our ancestry and to encourage us to, you know, still pay attention to what other people are writing, what other people are channeling, what other people, because that's really what this stuff is about. Like, religions are based on ancestral powers that were written about by those people. And then people take those texts and take those stories and they basically create this universal religion, and they kind of put everybody under it, which disconnects and severs their roots. So I know you and I were talking about kind of some of the spiritual communities, how there's truth and then there's kind of not truth or lies mixed up in there. How do you feel about, like, do you feel that there's maybe some kind of agenda going on there, or do you feel that people are just kind of getting trapped in that same cycle of, you know, focusing on the external and focusing on, you know, some other kind of universal power, so to speak?
I think that, how do I want to explain it? When it comes to religion, if you have a group of 500 people, let's just say you have a group of 500 people and you teach them all a religion, you learn what I call something called groupthink, where you all think the same.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is, who's the teacher? What's being taught? And how does it benefit the teacher? When we fall, like, I feel like indigenous people, we're emotional people and we're sentient beings, and so we're moved by things like the Holy Spirit and things like that, and it can be manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily know what a Holy Spirit is or what spirit you're under when you're inside of a church. And I'm saying that because I studied other things. And if you see people like, for example, worshiping the Orishas and allowing themselves to be mounted by the Spirit, there's no difference between that and going into a Pentecostal church. And so it made me start to think about, what are we accepting as truth? And whose truth is it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like as human beings, we should always allow critical thinking. And people don't. They allow themselves to, like, purely and 100% be manipulated by someone else's ideology of what religion is and how you should live your life. And I feel some type of way because you should not have to be told not to kill. You should not have to be told not to steal and things like that. I feel like it's human nature. You know when you're doing right and wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't need a religion to teach you these things. But because we're allowing ourselves to be manipulated, very few of that 500 people that was taught, this is the 10 Commandments and this is how you're going to live your life. Very few of those 500 people eventually, like, get sick of it and break away from it, or realize, hey, everybody's not following these laws exactly how they're written, et cetera, et cetera. But you have this thing, like, generation wise now, when it comes to religion, where it's not just my mom, it's my grandmom. It's not just my grandmom, it was my great grandmom. You know what I mean? Where everybody's taught that this is truth when it was pushed on you. And so I feel like we're in a time where people are waking up, in a sense, like waking up, because I always say, I'm going to do a video on it soon, actually, that you're not under a curse, we're under a spell.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start reading through the Bible, it is spell work, a lot of it, and can be manipulated to do so. And so when you start looking at things that way, who are we benefiting? Who is this religion benefiting? Because it's not benefiting us.
Mm-hmm.
We're not prosperous. We're not abundant. We're not, on a large scale of things. We're sitting at the bottom. And so to be taught that your good is in the afterlife and all this other kind of stuff, that heaven's in the afterlife and that you shouldn't enjoy this earth, who's it benefiting?
Right.
We got to step back and realize the value of life, and realize, more importantly, the value of your mind, and stop allowing yourself to be manipulated and controlled.
Mm-hmm.
We're so much more valuable than what we give ourselves credit for. We're so much more powerful as human beings than what we give ourselves credit for. And you're taught the complete opposite. That you're complete opposite from the time that you're born, that this is the box that you need to be inside of. And we got to start popping the lids on those boxes and start figuring out who we truly are.
Right. And one of the things you said about the spell work and the curses, one thing that's interesting is when you start getting into ancestral work and shamanism, and I know you can verify this, you find out that you can break, like, generational curses, you can break familiar curses, you can heal those lines. And to me, I don't feel that it's an accident that we're discouraged from dealing with our ancestors for that very reason, because when you start getting familiar with your ancestors and your roots, you start going within, you can actually start healing yourself and your line, by extension, vice versa, as within, so without. And so, of course, anything that's going to help you heal and empower yourself, anything like meditation, shamanic journeying, astral travel, chakra work, doing ancestral work, working with ancestral powers, working with totems, all of these things are going to be discouraged because it's going to empower you and cause you to disconnect from the paradigms that have been set up. And so, and that's what they don't want. They want it as a control mechanism. So to me, like, I am somebody that does ascribe, like, to, at a 3D level, to the Hebraic culture, but I don't subscribe to the religion, Christianity or Judaism. I subscribe to, like, the culture, the actual indigenous culture of those people. And a lot of those people spread out into areas, like, you know, they became like the indigenous people, like, and that actually all goes back to Mu and Lemuria and Atlantis, but I digress. The point being is that those people in of themselves, like, knew how to connect to their ancestors. They had their own culture, they had their own oracles, they had their own you know, seasonal laws, and like being in tune to the seasons. Like, they knew how to live according to the land. They, you know, could do, like, great, you know, miraculous things because they were in touch with their power. And so what, you know, when a conquered people comes and they turn around and they use the same, you know, they sit there and twist and they use the same customs, the same culture, the same books, turn around and oppress the people that it was actually for. And, you know, there's even, like, certain writings I've come across in the past where they were saying, like, that they were actually, you know, teaching the slaves, like, you know, when it came to, like, the transatlantic slave trade and the slavery that occurred in the United States specifically, that, you know, they even said outright, like, they didn't believe that melanated people or indigenous people, like the so-called natives or the so-called, like, you know, Negro race, had any right, like, they could ever be saved. They didn't believe they had a soul. So then right there, that confirms what you were saying earlier. If that's what they believed, then they weren't, you know, repackaging and creating a religion and teaching it for any other reason other than to control. So we have to kind of look at that honestly. And then there's the image of Jesus. That's not what the Yeshaya, the ancient Hebraic text, who was an Essene and ascended master, that's not what he looked like. He didn't look like, you know, Cesare Borgia. He didn't look like a Roman. But yet they use that image to go and conquer and destroy the real indigenous people, the real 12 tribes of Jacob, while convincing them, you kind of see what I'm saying, while convincing them that they needed to be saved and disconnecting them from their actual culture and heritage that those texts were originally written from. So it's like this big, you know, mind game. And like you said, it's literally a spell, like and it's calculated, you know? And so for me, like, when I started going within and I started, you know, going within, eventually as you start unlocking that DNA within yourself, you deal with your ancestors, you know. So you have a lot of people talking about dealing with their higher self, which is great. But to me, if you're really dealing with your higher self and you're really accessing those vortexes within yourself, those chakra points, you're eventually going to deal with your bloodline and your ancestry. If you're claiming to talk to your higher self, but you don't have any connection to your ancestors, either in 3D or cosmically, something's wrong. You know, what are you really talking to? What's going on, you know? So I hope I didn't go on a rampage there, but when you were bringing that up, it kind of got me thinking about all those things. So
what you're saying, the thing is, when people are channeling and all of that and they're skipping over their ancestors, you're like losing a form of protection, number one, to keep you from, you know, outside interference. And we aren't on this planet alone. We're just not. It's not just human beings here. And so you have to think about what things can interfere that you don't necessarily want. There's the reason the new age seems kind of creepy is because of that. Like, you can't not have a foundation, and ancestors are the foundation. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't skip that thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, what is a tree without roots? If you don't know your roots, then how can you access the rest of your tree? And I come across a lot of clients that will, you know, they'll be in the spiritual community, they'll consider themselves to be spiritual people, but they weren't taught how to do that. You know, they have no concept of their own ancestry, you know, maybe beyond the fact of, oh, well, I know my great-grandmother was this and she was from there or whatever, but the same people, while claiming to have spiritual guides and talking to their higher selves, like, can't access their own DNA records. They don't know how to commune with their ancestors. Like, they don't know anything about their own past lives. And so all of this stuff, that's kind of showing you're not really connecting with your DNA. You know, you're not really connecting with you. So then who are you connecting to? How are you communing with your higher self if you don't even have like that inner understanding or understanding of your own tree? Because that's really, you know, that's what awakening is. That's what ascension is activating your own ancestral tree, your own cosmic tree. So how are you doing that if you don't have access to that stuff at a base level? You know, ancestors, like you said, being the base foundation. So yeah, it's sad because there's still a disconnect there. That's why I say it's another type of religion. It's not that I don't agree with some of the stuff being taught. I know that there are star seeds. I know that there are cosmic ancestors, but when the dogma and the paradigm becomes another tool to disconnect us from our roots, then that's a problem, you know?
That's what it is.
Yeah.
I feel like it's another tool thrown out there in a way, because for those that aren't, you know, for no longer, you know, once you start reading the Bible, especially if you study with Hebrew Israelites, once you start decoding the Bible and like, oh, Jesus's name couldn't have been Jesus because J's didn't exist. You know, once you start digging into the scriptures, you're like, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. And so many people walk away from Christianity. And I feel like when it comes to New Age, it's a way to draw people in, like, okay, this is something different. Because
Right.
we get taught that you need religion, that as if that's, you know, some type of spiritual discipline, when, like I already said, your spiritual discipline comes from within. It is part of your DNA. It is part of your ancestral lineage. You need to use that as your foundation. But people, I feel like they feel like, oh, I don't have any guidance, or oh, I need somebody to guide over me, so they jump into New Age instead, and they're being manipulated by another type of entity or a corporate entity, I feel like. But I wanted to add more onto that. I feel like when it comes to white people and and their New Age thing, I feel like it's very necessary to say that it's important for you, more than us, to heal your lineage. Y'all are the ones causing havoc all across the world, and it's time for you to heal your lineage. It's not about, oh, well, I didn't enslave anyone, or I didn't colonize, I didn't rape, I didn't kill, I didn't kill, I didn't steal, I didn't go through killing all these people, and this is that and the other. You did, and you did it, and it's time for you to atone for that. And the way you do so is connecting with your ancestors, is saying, hey, what y'all did was wrong. And like, healing has to take place. Because healing hasn't taken place, you continue to reap the benefits of what you did, of what your ancestors did. You're the same. I'm saying you because it is you. If my great grandmother killed someone, guess what? So did I. And I need to heal the act that I did. Because we reincarnate, is what you said, because we reincarnate within our own lines, it's just as much my action as it is her action. And so while I'm living, I need to atone for it. While I'm living, I need to heal whatever thought processes I was going through that caused me to do whatever action. And if we don't dig in and start healing, if white people don't dig in and start healing their lineage, you're about to be taken over. Like, you're about to be knocked out off this planet, and that's the real thing that's going on. That's the reason why we're experiencing such a pushback during these times. When black people say, you know, we're humans, stop killing us. We're people, stop killing us. We have families. We're mothers, we're daughters, we're brothers, we're fathers. We shouldn't have to tell you that. You see that. Don't you have a family at home? Don't you value your life? Like, why are we less than human? You continue to perpetuate, you know, the thoughts and beliefs of your ancestors and reap from their benefits and not take any responsibility from now. And that's not going to fly.
Right. Well, the reason I feel like they're actually disconnected from their ancestors is because of that. There's a huge shadow. You know, you talk about shadow work. I actually talked about this on my group, Starship Shadow Hunters. Shadow is collective too, and there is a collective shadow that is very dark and very wide within the so-called white race, because they don't acknowledge what their ancestors have done. They try to disconnect from it. I understand that, like, a lot of people are horrified by that. They'll acknowledge it and they feel like that's enough and they should get a gold star for that. But the problem is that everybody, like everybody on this earth plane is, you know, subject to the laws of karma, you know, part of the laws of the 7 principles of universal laws. And so we all have to pay for the sins of our ancestors, so to speak, because we are one with them, you know. And so it doesn't help anybody, them included, you know, definitely doesn't like help indigenous people, but them included, it doesn't help anybody to ignore what their ancestors did. Or like
Yep.
someone like me that's got a mixed race, like, you know, I would go insane if I didn't integrate and heal and face all of these different components of my DNA. I would go absolutely batshit crazy. And so, like, you can't ignore the collective shadow within your DNA. That's not the path to healing. That's just going to make shit worse. And one way or the other, like you said, one way or the other, that karma is going to come. So, you know, you can either make things easier by healing, you know, healing yourself within. And the more each person that's part of that collective heals themselves within, the more that the healing takes place at a collective level. So it's good that there are more so-called white people finally seeing what's going on, and that's only because of the social media and stuff. But the next step is to actually face that stuff from within and deal with it and to heal it, and also to offer recompense and to offer reparation, to actually try to reverse what was done. Because that karma is going to come one way or another. And based on what I've seen, I know you've seen in that dream, which we will talk about in a little bit, you saw in that dream, like the Anunnaki ancestral gods coming back and taking people out. I saw the same thing. And I saw that there's going to be a point of no repentance, like, because people have had a long time to get this right. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, even now, if they correct things, like, it's not going to stop that retribution from happening. And some people just who refuse to align to the laws of the earthly mother and heavenly father are not going to make it to the next age, period. They're not, because their vibration and the resonance of their DNA, and they behave as intruders on this plane of existence. They don't behave aligned to the actual earth and its laws. So, you know.
You're absolutely right about that. I definitely believe that when the Bible was talking about a new earth being made after a time of tribulation and stuff like that in Revelation, I'm kind of paraphrasing the whole book, but I definitely believe that the new earth, that it was definitely about going up into a next dimension. We're ascending. And people, there are large amounts of death, not just because there's a, you know, so-called suspected virus and all of that kind of stuff. We are experiencing judgment. We're in the middle of judgment. And people are being judged for their actions. People are being judged for their character, for their vibration, for their frequency that they live on. And I feel like it's no accident when you look around. We've been mentally manipulated, which we've already talked about it. But then you have cultural thing, like the amount of drug use inside the United States is ridiculous. And what do drugs do? Trap you. You know what I mean? And they don't just trap you like on a vibrational level, they trap the whole soul.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a reason for that. Then you have human trafficking that's going on like crazy, that's been covered up. You have all of this I was about to call sex trafficking as well. That's part of what people are doing when they're trafficking these humans, is sex trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that are going to come to light, and we don't need to take up the whole video because it's happening, whether you know, whether they try to fight against it, whether they try to hide, it's happening, and it's happening, and it's happening. And people are being judged for their actions. Things are being brought to light, and not the prettiest way. This year is going to be ugly, and it's going to be ugly through and through, but it's necessary for healing. Like you're saying, if you keep, just because you ignore something, like just because you ignore the elephant in the room, it doesn't make it any more disappeared than it was 5 minutes ago. Like, it's still there. And there's certain things like that just have to be taken care of. And I like how you said that they keep acting like they behave as if they're intruders on this planet. Like, why is everybody else able to respect human life and you treat everyone else as if they don't matter? And it's not even just human beings like that don't look like you, like people of color, that you view them as less than human. You feel nothing when you see someone's child killed on national TV or whatever. You feel nothing when you hear about Black people being hung from trees. Not only that, but these people like sympathize more with animals than they do with human beings, and that's just outrageous.
Right.
Well, some animals, let me put it that way, some animals, because let me not get all political.
No, I understand.
And all of that kind of stuff, but you know, some animals deserve better treatment than other animals, and that's just ridiculous. And I see it happening, and not only that, like, they have so much power to where people emulate them, and it just drives me nuts. But that's just me.
I totally get it. And the thing is like my whole thing is like, there are people from different tribal lineages, from different races. Like, there are people like that are fed up, like, from all of these different lineages. But the thing is that it's not enough to just say, oh, well, I see what you're going through, and I'm really sorry that that's happening, or I don't like what's going on this earth. I don't align to it, you know, and then people just kind of disconnect and they just kind of go to la la land. The thing is like, we have to really make the changes that we want to see, like, within ourselves, and that will reverberate, you know. So in other words, let me put you like this. There was this guy, I think I might have mentioned this when we talked earlier, but there was this guy who had he found out that basically his ancestors were slave owners. Not just slave owners, he found out that they had originally taken land from, like, the so-called natives as well. And so what he did was, instead of him just being like, oh my God, I found this out, I feel so bad, and whatever, going back to his regular life, he actually donated all of those trusts. He gave all of that back. So that's an example of somebody that's actually changing through action to try to heal it. That's a real person. The people that are actually physically, like, donating money, or physically there trying to help and put work in, trying to heal, that admit, like, what their ancestors did, that put things on blast, that are, like, physically backing it up with actual actions, not just, you know, shallow words. That's, you know, that's the kind of thing that people who are not from indigenous bloodlines, who know their ancestors were part of that, that's how to heal that. But there is a misnomer that, like, people do tend to lump, like, all so-called white people together. There are so-called white people that had absolutely nothing to do with that, like, total different parts of the world. But that's not really the case with the majority of the people in the United States, which I think is probably more where a lot of these issues are coming from, because that is where I feel like a lot of the denial takes place. And also, like, in areas of Australia and Europe, which were some of the main areas, and the Middle East. The Middle East, right now, the people that are in the Middle East, you know, everyone forgets about, you know, the Mohammedan incursions and what happened there as well. So it wasn't just, you know, certain so-called white people, it was also them as well. So there were different types of races and stuff that were involved in the oppression of the indigenous people. And it really was a focused effort. It was a calculated move. To, as you said earlier, disconnect from the roots and disempower and cut us off from our ancestors. But I think, like, the first step is to do, for all of us, I mean, indigenous people included, is to do shadow work, to get in touch with our ancestors, to, you know, to show reverence toward and venerate all of our ancestors regardless of who they are, to look at our sins, to look at the things we've done in the past, things our ancestors have done in the past, both good and bad, and to heal and integrate that. And then when that process starts happening, I feel like on the external, we will start showing that inner work, and we'll start, you know, doing things in action. And then I feel like for, like, all of the so-called indigenous people, like, we really need to focus on getting off grid if possible. We need to focus on getting back to the land. We need to focus on, because what I was shown is that those of us who are in tune with Mother Earth, if we're living off grid according to Mother Earth and we're obeying her laws and we're living in tune to her, we're going to be safe from all of these plagues and all this destruction that's coming. It's not going to touch us.
100%.
You know what I'm saying? But if we end up like getting all cozy with the enemy, so to speak, I hate to put it that way. I'm not saying that everybody that's not indigenous is an enemy, but at this point in time, with what's going on, we have an oppressor. We have, you know, certain families and bloodlines that are actively oppressing and trying to keep us in that position and kill us and everything else. So for that, we have to get away from those people. We have to get away from the systems and societies that are built upon the blood of our people. And we can't keep thinking that we're going to be able to fix that society and keep trying to live within that society. We need to extricate ourselves out of that society. That society wasn't made for us. That society was built off of our backs. It wasn't made for us. You know, look at what's going on with the reservations. Look at what's going on, you know, with the indigenous children in cages on the border. What's going on with the other indigenous people? They're being shot by police. They're being, you know, put in prison and are being hung. I mean, this is crazy. So obviously this system, this society is not for us. It's for them. And it's going to fall. So the best thing we can do is, if we have the means to, is to extricate ourselves out of that system and learn to live off grid, learn to live in tune with nature, like get harmonized now so that we can be prepared, and it's not as much of a shock to our system and our comfort level when that system falls, because it is going to fall. And I feel like it's the same thing for the other peoples of the earth too. Like anyone that's going to live aligned to the earth mother, that's going to respect that, that's going to like align to that vibration and that shift, like these are the people that'll make it to the next age, not the people that, you know, are oppressing the indigenous people and that are violating the laws of the earthly mother and heavenly father.
As you're saying that, I'm envisioning something. As you're talking about us living off grid and moving away from the society, I feel like as if it's happening from deep within the roots of the earth, that ancestors are shaking the indigenous people, their lineage. They're shaking us, and then as we shake, we're shaking the foundation, because this was built on top of us, like you just said. We're shaking that foundation. So slowly but surely, as we continue to shake, as we continue to protest and riot and speak out against things, and then more importantly, using that ancestor work, we build momentum to shake this whole system down, to put things back in order. And I feel like as if it's not everyone, of course, like, I mean, thanks for watching this video, but everyone isn't a part of it, a part of the rebuilding. There's certain people of us who have the knowledge, who've been sitting, like for me, this has been about a 10-year journey, but I've always been different in a way. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a surprise to me to fall away from religion and begin to practice and come back to myself. And inside of each family, I feel like the more people that talk to me, the more you see people like, I'm the only one, I don't know what to do. You know, my family doesn't agree with this.
Right.
That type thing. You're meant to be a part of the rebuilding. And so it's going to take us that are in tune. It's going to take us that are connected to lead and guide the way.
Right.
Back, but the way is going backwards. It's not going forwards. It's going,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, excuse me, we're going forward.
No, what you're saying is perfect. It's the ancient ways. We got to get back to the ancient ways. It even says that in the Bible for people that, yeah, we got to get back to the ancient ways. And we have to go back to our own culture because of, you know, cleaving to these people's culture and their melting pot, which really goes back to Greco-Roman society. It's not benefiting us, like you said in the very beginning of the video. It doesn't benefit us. It's not for us. So we have to do what is for us. We have to get in touch with our power. We can't. Their power is actually built to oppress us, keep us in possession, keep us spellbound, as you said before, keep us cursed, and to feed off of us. It's not there to prop us up. It's there to prop them up. So we have to extricate ourselves from that, and we have to go back to our roots and our ways. That's why they begin so pissed off about it too, and they don't like everything. Is like whenever you start talking about your ancestors and your roots, a lot of people will kind of start freaking out because they're not in touch with theirs, and because for what we said earlier, a lot of the people, you know, they don't want to look at a lot of the stuff that happened in the past, but we have to go back to the past, like you said.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. Walk in ancient ways. It's not that I don't think the technology and all of that is great. It's great, but we need to get back to a natural way of living. When you start talking about control, we have to realize like how deeply we're in this. shit. And the fact that you don't grow your own food, you depend on the grocery stores to get food from other places. Sorry about that.
No, you're okay.
You depend on the grocery stores to bring in food from wherever farm or wherever lab that it's created in. You depend on them to fill the grocery stores up with food. You depend on them to supply your water. You depend on everything outside. Like, we're so spoiled. We're so used to living in the system that we don't know how to live outways. But, you know, over the past few years, like you said about living off grid, I've been one person to educate myself and to start figuring out how would I survive without all of these things. And we do need to make a movement to move out of the way. I'm not the only person, but plenty of people have had dreams about this land being destroyed or about natural disasters and things like that hitting this area and making things crumble. And when you get these warnings from spirit, you've got to pay attention and prepare in the best way that you can. But I feel like people are so hypnotized by modern world, they can't let go. It's like Kool-Aid that you keep drinking. You know it's bad for you. You know you don't need red dye and sugar and stuff like that. You know you need fresh 100% water. Our bodies are 70% water, but you keep drinking the Kool-Aid because that's all you know. We have to be willing to step away from the system and say that's not what we want. And it's okay to start from the bottom and rebuild again. We built this shit. It's okay to start over and build something else.
You're absolutely right. There is a fear there. Like you're saying, there's a fear that people don't want to step away, like they're afraid. But you know, that whole one thing that and I feel like the reason that the Illuminati are actually, I feel like they know they have to step down, and I feel like that's why they're kind of slowly, I don't know if you've noticed, but they're slowly inserting more melanated people like into movie positions, more women into movie positions as well. Like I'm talking about like the main characters, the heroes, the heroines. They have a new show out now where it shows like so-called black people actually being slave owners over so-called white people. That's huge. That would not have come out like 20 years ago. They're starting to, I don't know, like I've been sensing they're starting to actually self-destruct their own society. But where they're mistaken is they think they're going to make it through to the other side, and they're not going to. But even they can sense that it's time for them to kind of step down. Like they know their time's up, and I can see them kind of scurrying to try to put things back. Like they're trying to take us out as much as possible at the same time, but they're also trying to like save their own bloodlines. You know, they got all these underground bunkers. They're busy. They're doing, but they're not gonna, there's even scriptures that talk about how we're gonna go in after them and pull them out and put them in chains. I mean, that's huge. Like, so they're not gonna make it through this whole process. Like, and what a lot of people don't understand too is that the sun is gonna get brighter. So it's not just the, what's going on like with the earth. It's not just gonna be the earthquakes and the locusts and the hurricanes and the volcanoes and all of that. The actual sun itself is going to be brighter. And so a lot of people who don't have like a lot of melanin, like even in their skin, are going to have a hard time, like, and may have to go underground even just to survive. So these are things that aren't really talked about a lot. You know, the coming earth is going to be specifically for the indigenous people.
Yep.
So, and it doesn't mean, that when people pass on, it doesn't mean there's not another place for other folks. We incarnate all throughout this universal egg, and there's also other universal eggs within the multiverse. It doesn't mean there's not a different place, but this ain't going to be it. It's not going to be here, because look at what's happened. Look at what's happened with all these other people, like them being here and how what's happened to the earth and stuff. So.
Yeah, I feel like it's a real crumbling of the matrix. Like when you hear about the matrix at first, but you don't really get it until you see it. When this coronavirus hit, and all of a sudden people can work from home, you don't have to go work 80 hours in the office trying to kill yourself to pay all this rent. You mean to tell me I can work from home? That type thing. The whole world is put to a stop, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, what do we do?" You have everybody feeling so anxious and all that kind of stuff. I'm over here chilling. Let me tell you, because Y'all just don't know that it's our time. For everybody that's up hollering and screaming and they're angry and all this other kind of stuff, I felt that like 5, 6, 10 years ago.
Right.
This is our time now.
Right.
And, you know, for those in the know, you know to be calm. You know to just keep doing what you've been doing, really. Just keep doing what you've been doing. But no, it's interesting watching the Matrix crumble. It's interesting watching people all of a sudden saying, hey, something doesn't make sense, or what's the government hiding from us? I'm glad some of y'all are waking up. Some of us have been awake, you know what I mean? And it's, I don't know, I just feel happy at the end of it, because it's like, no, I'm not the only one seeing this.
Did you feel, for me, I felt like it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I felt these chains break, like over my spirit. Like I felt something shift, and it was actually around that time that I felt that I was able to make more like spiritual progress, able to make more progress moving off grid, able, like my chakras, my DNA start acting, my ancestors. It was like somebody just turned shit on and up, you know what I mean? I felt something shift. You feel that too around that same time? It was like something just kind of,
And I feel like it's just pushing forward right now in this moment, like as we speak.
Yeah.
It's like been a slow momentum, but I feel like as if it's like a lot faster, like it just shifted into next gear right about now.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so funny what you said. I feel the same way. I'm not afraid. It's like I know I'm going to make it through. Like the one thing that I know is I know it's still a preparation time for all people. Even if you're indigenous, like we have to spend more time out in the sun. We need to purify our bodies, our temples. We need to make sure we're more aligned to the earth and the cycles. We need to kind of like detox, so to speak, from a lot of this technology and this system. My husband and I have been preparing to be off grid for like 5 years now, and it's a long process. We've run into a lot of obstacles that are finally starting to clear up. But, you know, we've been kind of planning this for a while. Like we had visions like years ago, like of all this stuff, but it's getting more like frequent, you know what I'm saying? But we're not afraid. It's so weird. It's like you said, this calmness, like, no, this is a good thing. Other people are feeling this way because it's the people that aren't awake. It's the indigenous people that aren't yet awake. And it's also the other races are feeling this because it's their society that's ending. So, you know, that's kind of, because, I feel exactly how you do. I feel like a sense of calm. I feel like protected. I almost like feel like there's this protection over me. It's weird. And so I'm with you on that. And I felt the same exact way when the corona thing started happening. In fact, I noticed, like, whereas I had trouble kind of getting my business off the ground years ago, always having obstacles, my business actually started thriving more after this happened. So it's like everything is like revert. You know what I'm saying? It's like all like, it's just reversing. It's interesting, you know?
It is.
Speaking of that,
also,
oh, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Sorry. I was about to throw in a parable. As you were speaking, I was thinking about one of the parables that Jesus said, where if you have a tree and it's not producing fruit, that it's got to, you know, be cut off and thrown off into the fire. And I think that some people need to, I'm not saying not to grieve people, not to mourn people, but more people are going to die. You're just going to see the numbers go up. And I'm not saying like get comfortable, but they're not producing fruit. They're no good. And that goes for everyone. It doesn't just apply to white people or whatever. It doesn't just apply to them, because some people have been so mentally conditioned and controlled that they're no good anymore.
Right.
That they can't be recuperated. And so, you know, bless them, but they've also got to go. Yeah,
and it is hard. Like what you said, it's hard because we don't want to be like totally cold about it, but at the same time we don't want to be totally attached to it either and get sucked into that, because I even have family members, you know, like I said, I come from mixed heritage, so I have family members that are indigenous. I have other family members who are not. None of my family members are what you would call conscious, and it pains me to kind of sense that as this stuff is coming, most of them probably aren't going to make it through. And I'm not trying to numb myself to that or kind of push it into the shadow and pretend, you know, but at the same time, it's taken me years. Over several years, I've been coming to terms with that, because there's just nothing I can do. Each person on their path, their reincarnation cycle, their path of ascension, so to speak, is their own. I can't save anybody. And each person is at different levels of consciousness and conscious awareness. And there's nothing I can do about that. All I can do is put information out, try to do readings with people, try to do healings with people, try to teach people techniques on how to heal themselves. That's all I can do. And excuse me. And so exactly what you're saying, like, it's not that we're not saying like, oh, you know, cut yourself off, be cold about it. But at the same time, we have to kind of focus on what's coming and prepare ourselves and not really get caught up in the emotion of it, because that's just gonna get us stuck in another trap.
Yep. It's interesting that you said that you've been like going through the process of letting go over time. Like especially I would say like 2018 going into 2019, I felt like I was mourning everything. Like all I could do was cry. All I felt was this heaviness all the time. And I feel like that's exactly what I was mourning, all the people that can't come with me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And I mean, there's even changes that I see in myself I have to make for what's coming as well. My diet, I know we were talking about food earlier. I feel like for me, that's like my last hedonistic thing, like my last fig leaf, so to speak, that's got to go, is my food addiction. And because of a lot of, well, because I am a starseed. When I came in this avatar, I kind of had problems right out the gate, and I know I had a lot of implants put in me. I had a lot of like allergy problems, I had a lot of like physical health issues that I had to kind of barrel through. And I feel like that's also the case for people that come from shamanic bloodlines as well. Like usually you end up kind of dealing with sickness or death or near death, and you learn to kind of heal yourself. So, because otherwise, how can you heal other people? But I've always felt like I didn't quite fit into my avatar all the way, and I have to kind of do a better job of aligning in that sense, because it's, you know, caused me to have allergy problems to the point where I have to take like pharmaceutical allergy medication. Like natural allergy medication is not available here. And that's one frustrating thing about being in Egypt, where I had access to that in other places where I could, you know, make tinctures and stuff like that. And so I need to figure out alternatives so that I'm not taking any pharmaceuticals in my body whatsoever. And so I'm not dependent on food to the point where I'm going to be so attached that I'm not going to be okay with long fasting periods, or I'm not going to be okay with foraging. Because foraging is a tool in a lot of ways. A lot of us are going to survive off of foraging, especially during the first aspect of this transition, because we're not going to have full-on tribal communities built right away. So a lot of us are going to survive with the simplicity of foraging. So these are all things like for myself that I'm kind of trying to cleanse and prepare my own body and my own mind and my own spirit for this, you know, because this system has done a number on me, and it's done a number on all of us. Like all of us, I feel to some degree, like, you know, have been damaged in our bodies and our minds, you know, in our emotions, in our spirit. You know, we have to kind of, now is the time to focus and repair ourselves and heal ourselves and prepare for what's coming, you know, internally and externally.
You're right. I think, and that's another thing with the energetic shift that's going on. We're all experiencing a DNA upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I feel like, you know, some of us feel more called than ever to get our health together.
Even like dreadlocks. It was so funny because I felt the need to start them a couple years ago, and mine aren't fully formed yet. They're getting there, but it was so funny because I was watching a video the other day that was like confirmation. Like, oh, well, you know, not only does it help with the subtle energies, which I already knew, but a lot of people are feeling the need to do that because of the solar shifts that are happening. So a lot of us are going more natural. Like a lot of women stop shaving. A lot of men are growing their beards out. A lot of people are growing their hair out, or they're braiding it, or they're putting it in dreadlocks. That's also because of what's happening and getting more in touch with our ancestors. And there's actually a physical and spiritual component to that. You know, when we go that route, it actually helps us because our hair is there to connect with the subtle energies. So little things like that, it's just funny because like I was led to do those things and not really sure why when I was first led to do them, and then come to find out all of the benefits and the reasons spiritually and physically later. And the same thing with wanting to go raw vegan. Like it was just something I felt pulled to do, even though I've struggled with it. I'm gonna keep working toward that because it's something I know that's important for the future, because if we reach a point where we're not dependent, addicted to food, we can just survive on raw food, then we can just go up to a tree, we can pull a fig off and eat it. We can forage, dandelions or pine nuts or whatever, and we can live that way, and it won't be a big deal to us. It won't be a shock to our system. Whereas if we're used to eating, pizza and French fries and burgers and all this stuff, it's going to be a much harder transition.
But it's funny you said that, because we are transitioning back to it as a culture in a way. Like everybody's transitioning back to not growing hair. Everybody's starting to think about the soaps, about your lotions, about makeup, about the food that you consume, whether it's GMO, whether it's organic. How is this affecting the our circulatory system, our endocrine system? Like people are starting to really dig and dive, and I feel like eventually we will get back to wholeness and stop this whole microwave society where everything needs to be at your fingertips, where you just gotta have it. We'll stop all of that.
Right.
There's so many people that can't see a world without it because that's all they've ever lived in.
Right.
But some of us have woken up to that, quite some time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And at least for me, that's one of the businesses that I'm starting now is an herbal business, and I've been studying it. I've actually, by trade, I'm a pharmacy technician.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you understand how all that works. Yeah.
I've been doing it for about 10 years, and I started studying herbs about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, because so many customers kept saying, well, what can I use? Well, what else can I use? I don't want to give this to my kid, or I don't want to try this. What can I use? And so that's how I kind of got started in studying that. And I don't have a lot of products out right now because, I don't know, I still work in the field. I just do it by phone now. But no, I just want to make sure that I meet regulation and stuff like that before I put products and stuff out. But I've gotten good into the study of it. And as you say, like, as we're moving forward into the ways of our ancestors, it makes so much more sense to be studied in the herb field and understand what's safe for our bodies and how to use it and how to forage and how to grow our own food. Like, we're going back to it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, whether people like it or not, we're going back to it.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be expensive like they're trying to charge 3 and 4 times the price for organic food and stuff like that. It's not going to be like that.
Yeah, and you're right. And you know what? I think that's really divine providence, where you're in the pharmaceutical field. So because you not only are you able to learn and you understand like both the chemical and the natural products and how it operates, but also like you said, you also kind of meet customers that way as well, and clients. And as you're and I love that you're also taking the steps to become fully educated and certified in it. And I think it's super important right now. We need a lot of people that are doing this. I actually have a friend that does this. I did it a little bit before my husband and I started traveling, but just small things, nothing big. I've had to kind of shut down my more physical business, of sewing and doing jewelry, and because we don't have the means, while we're traveling, while we're trying to prepare for off-grid and stuff. But it's necessary. And what you said reminded me, we need to be learning these skills. We need to be learning skills like herbology, foraging, pottery, carpentry, agriculture, husbandry, clothes making. I mean, these are all things we got to get back to knowing how to do this, so that we're not, like you said earlier, dependent on, stores and governments and other people, so that we can. And it doesn't mean that in the community, most of the time in community, different people have different things to specialize in, and then you end up trading and stuff, later on. But when we're first going through this transition, it's important that all of us, to a degree, have a little bit of these skills. You know, we may have like one particular thing we focus on more. Like for you, you might focus more on like doing like the herbal treatments, you know, doing like shamanistic healing, and somebody else might focus on like basket weaving, for example, or doing like, you know, crystal healing. And just, you know, just kind of throwing it out there, like, but we all kind of have to learn these these types of skills that are gonna benefit us in the future, and not be so focused on building up a house of cards, so to speak, that's going to be torn down, you know, when the system falls. I kind of feel like now's the time to stop investing in this system and start investing in you know, what's coming. I feel like that's a good segue for us to talk about like what you do. Like, I'd really like to give you an opportunity to talk about that. And I would also like to, before we wrap up the video, to also talk about the dream, because I know I mentioned it in the beginning, but I wanted to make sure we touched on all the ancestral stuff, because like we were both saying, is super important. But I'd love to have you talk to the people on our channels about what you do for a living, you know, some things you're going to be doing in the future, and then we can talk about that. If you're okay with that, is that cool?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So I already said that I'm a pharmacy technician by trade, so my herbal business is called Maze Botanicals. Right now I just have a few products out, and I'm just on Etsy. In the future, I will create a website, and when I create the website, my biggest ideal is not just to put products, but also to kind of maybe have like a glossary of sorts where people can research what herbs use, because in the future, I want to have land. I want to be able to bulk produce herbs and teach people how to use them for themselves and for their family members. That's important to me, because the same way, you know, right now where they have everybody rushing for gloves and masks and for alcohol and peroxide and, you know, all these things, and you go to the store and they're empty, you can expect something like that to happen in the pharmaceutical industry as well. And you don't want to be stuck with high blood pressure. You don't want to be stuck with high cholesterol. You don't want to be stuck with, you know, not having blood thinners, you know, things that are kind of common, kidney disease, stuff like that. And I also want to make a point out that things can be reversed. And so I expect a lot of being able to like expand and teach people how to take charge of their health, because the healthcare field is not for you. They don't really care about you. They just live to profit off of you. And the sooner people realize that, the better. And I'm saying it as somebody who works in the field. Pharmaceuticals, the medication is made for you to become dependent on it. And we're talking throughout this video about not being dependent. And so it's important for people to learn these things and to take charge of their health. And the body constantly, like, it wants to heal itself. And once you understand that, I feel like that's the first step, is to understand that your body wants to heal itself, and it will tell you what to do in order to do so. That's number one. Herbs and food, they need to kind of go in combination to have good health. And there's things that I'm healing myself, and I'm just myself of right now, and I'm just amazed for like finally putting my 100% trust in the earth and in myself, and in the belief that my body can heal itself of whatever I've been diagnosed with. But I won't get into that in this video. That's one part of me. The other part of me is the shaman me. So I practice shaman healing, particularly I work with snake medicine, which is, well, the snake, it transforms, it sheds its skin, it renews itself and over throughout life. And so that's what I teach people. I have not been, let's just say I haven't answered the calling in the way that I should in the past, but at this time I feel like as if now is the time to get that information out here and how to help people to practice shamanic healing, because it isn't just for the shaman that's been called. Certain things can be practiced by all. In order to get in the practice of healing, in order to get in the practice of communing with your ancestors and communing with your higher self, and your spirit team as well. And so those are the things that I want to start teaching about on my channel. And Inadu Healing Center is my new name for the business. Inadu is the Cherokee word for serpent. And that's what I'm about. I'm about snake medicine. I'm about transforming. I'm about healing and using different modalities to heal ourselves as we go forward. And so, yeah, follow my channel and watch the growth and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's primary. I feel like they're two in the same. To practice shamanism and healing from within is the same as practicing like herbs. To me, it's all about healing, and that's my purpose.
Awesome. And yes, everyone, I will be putting links down in the drop-down menu so you can contact Keyia for these services. You'll know how to access that, and you'll be able to contact and talk with her directly. And also, please follow her and hit the notification bell on her channel as well. So yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm just gonna say this real quick because I don't want to like go off course too much, because I know I was gonna have you talk about the dream before we wrap it up. But when you were saying that, I was like, bells going off in my head, because a lot of people understand that, you know, shamanism is both. You know, a lot of times when you are called by, you know, the Great Spirit, or depending on the tribal association that you have as an indigenous person, you know, when you're called to shamanism, like, you know, medicinal healing is part of that too. And I feel like you touching on that was so huge, because I do feel like that gets overlooked a lot. Like people, you know, when they think of shamans, they forget that, you know, a shaman within a tribal culture did both. They were both like a medicine man or woman, and they traveled to the underworld to heal. It was all about healing. Also, we were saying about the snake. I know you and I talked about that, how we both have like snake as our totem. You know, the transformation, the healing that takes place through the snake totem, people that use the snake medicine. So it all resonates with me. And also, you know, just to connect this to what we're about to be talking about, for those who don't know, the symbol of the snake, or the snake totem, actually connects to the Anunnaki Enki line, which is connected to the Nibiru, which is connected to the Hebrews, which is connected to the indigenous people of North Central South America, and scattered to the four corners of this earth. So it all connects. In fact, everywhere you see the serpent, you will see an indigenous culture of wisdom, the wisdom of the serpent. You can see it with the ancient Druids. You can see it with the Aztecs. You can see it with the Native Americans within North America. You can see it over in Thailand with the Naga, and in Egypt. I mean, it's all over. So this is the connection there, guys. That is a core indigenous totemic DNA resonance that is within the DNA. So cool. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of touch on before we transition to the dream? Like, is there anything else you wanted to say, like, that you feel is important to kind of get out there, like, along this topic?
Not really. I think we said a lot.
Cool. Okay, so guys, Keyia had an amazing dream, like very earth-shattering and very like real. And this is coming. This is happening. I've talked about this on my channel. She's talked about it on hers. A lot of the Nibiru bloodlines are waking up to this fact. She's going to share with us. Keyia, were you wanting to like share the whole dream? Were you gonna give clip notes, or how did you want to go about this?
I'm just gonna shorten it.
Okay, so she's gonna talk about it and what she dreamed, and the interpretation she was given for that dream, and the relevance of it right now, and what's going on, tying everything into what we've been saying today on the interview about what's coming, the new earth, people connecting to their ancestors. So I'll go ahead and give that over to you, Keyia.
Okay, so the full dream is going to be on my page, and there's a part 1 and a part 2, because when I had the dream, the spirit was so heavy on me that I couldn't shake it, and I feel like I had more to say. But what I want to paraphrase is that in the dream, it was weird because Terry Crews was my husband, the actor, and he was not there with me in the dream. He was away on a trip, and I was inside some sort of, it looked like a weird type of facility, and multiple people lived there, and they were all wealthy people. And there was like a parade or something going on outside, and I had kids, but I don't actually have kids. But in this dream, I had kids, and they were out with my neighbor's kids, and my neighbor came over talking to me, and I was like, "Ooh, do you feel that?" And she was like, "No, what are you talking about?" And I went outside, and when I went outside, the ground was rolling like a roller coaster, like literally picking up and rolling. And there were these beings, and oh my God, they were huge. They were super huge, like super tall, and in a human form, you know, like two eyes and a nose and a mouth, and you know, hands and feet. They almost had a metallic look to themselves, almost like similar to looking like Transformers or something, but golden. And they were walking up the street, and people were running like hell towards the opposite direction, towards my left. And I'm standing there, and I'm just watching this and thinking, like, where are my kids at? And we just, you know, the presence of them was just absolutely terrifying. But more importantly, about the dream is that they were picking people up and they were judging them. They were picking people up and saying, molester, and just throwing them. There was this machine that was behind them that kind of looked like a military tank, and they were throwing the people into this machine, destroying them, and just picking people off, like just naming out their sins, just picking them by their collar and tossing them into this machine. And at the other end of the kind of like the other end of the street, like where the parade would have been ending, there were these light beings that were also very huge, light, like almost like silver type, and their skin almost looked like silver. It was so glowing and so bright, and they were collecting children. And parents, you know, seeing the light beings, thinking, okay, this is the devil on one side and this is the angels on the other side, and people were taking their children, saying, take my kids, take us with you. And they were handing their children over to these light beings, and the light beings were putting them up on these, in these mobile, they kind of look like clouds, but I guess they look like clouds because they were up so high, but they were putting them on these, you know, flying things, and putting the children into those, into safety. And the people, the adults, they were being judged and thrown into this machine. And the important thing about the dream, I guess, that really stuck out is that people weren't being judged for things that you think that you're being judged about. It's not about what these what do you call it?
Like
it's not about what
institutions,
right,
what they,
right. Exactly. It wasn't like religious, like you'd think that you'd be judged about that, like as if you were going to heaven or hell. People have this concept that as if judgment is only after you die. And that's not what we're about to see. That's not what we're experiencing right now.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like, you know, it's very obvious that they're here. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like I was seeing something that was on 5D, and we haven't completely merged into a new Earth. We haven't completely merged into the fifth dimension that we'll be living on, where things will make sense again. We haven't completely merged into that. Right now, you're seeing the judgments. I hate to get all super political because I don't really like politics. Never have, but it's like now, I don't know, I feel drawn to it. I'm paying more attention, and people are talking about Trump. There's certain people who are aware that he's bringing out the truths about the human trafficking, about the sex trafficking, about the sex rituals and stuff, and celebrities and all this stuff that people are involved in that's happening. And when they were calling out the sins, that was one of the major ones that they were throwing people into these facilities for, into that machine for.
Right.
And at some point they got
like child sacrifice and stuff like that.
Exactly. And that's something that we can't continue to allow to happen. I'm saying we like it's me, but it is me judging. It is me punishing at the same time. People are thinking that the punishment is after death, and it's not like that. Not at all. And even further in the dream, at some point in time, I felt like they were so close to me, I better run. Even though I knew I didn't do anything wrong, I felt like I better run. And so me and my neighbor inside this facility, we ran, and we tried to hit the emergency button inside the facility that would like lock down the doors. Mm-hmm. But one of the beings was coming towards me, and it was weird. She stuck her hand through the door, and it was like a rubber glove or something. And she still pushed the door completely open, and she walked right past me and just walked right past me and started picking people inside the facility, just grabbing them. She lifted up the lockdown doors, just lifted it up and start reaching people inside of the facility that were in control of it and just throwing people to the right. And somebody was collecting them and throwing them into this machine. And I think that we are experiencing judgment. That's what we're watching right now. Mm-hmm. It looks like a bunch of chaos. It looks like a bunch of pointing fingers. But the truth is that our ancestors are present, mm-hmm. and they're demanding reparations. They're demanding restitutions. They're demanding atonement for the blood that's spilled on this earth. And it's all over the earth. And the Anunnaki are here to judge. They're here to put things back in order.
Yes.
For those of us, if you feel the calling, it's time for you to get into alignment. Mm-hmm. Get into alignment with the old ways. Let me just say that they tried to erase us, but there's things that can't be erased. When you hear people talking about, as you spoke about before with dreadlocks, when you hear people talking about not cutting your hair, there's a reason why as indigenous people, we don't cut our hair. Mm-hmm. By nature, we don't cut our hair. We lock our hair and do different things to try to keep it, manageable, but we don't cut our hair because it is your antennae, and the way you eat. I feel like I need to talk about drumming, about why we drum, why we
talk about it.
So, like, it's interesting enough, like, you see it across every culture. There is no indigenous culture that doesn't have some sort of drumming practice, doesn't have some sort of community practice where you dance the earth, what we call dancing the earth here. And we're about to get back into those practices. Mm-hmm. I don't have a community here that does so, but I would love to start one because I do it myself.
Nice.
But the ancestors are calling us to get back into alignment, to get back into order, mm-hmm. in the natural order of things. And I feel like as if I was having that dream as a preview, because like I said, this year is not going to be pretty. You're going to see natural disasters and unnatural disasters happen. And I feel like the elite, they definitely have some things planned and up their sleeves to try to trick everyone. Mm-hmm. And so you can expect that as well. Mm-hmm. But it's going to backfire. Like, it's all going to be for our good. And it's important for us to start meditating and start learning these ways and returning into the ways of our ancestors, because that is the future.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned the drumming, because I remember I was telling you that I went to this retreat and I didn't realize how many shamanistic techniques I was doing naturally when I was there. I went to the Shadow Work Shamanistic Retreat, and I sat there pissed off most of the time because the woman that was there as a shaman that was teaching stuff was actually teaching back to me things that were taught within my ancestors that I had been disconnected from. And there was this targeting that was going on. And I don't know if it was conscious or unconscious on her end, but basically really like targeting me, trying to get me to take, my head wrap off, basically speaking against, indigenous people, like in Central South America, how if you're going to go there and you're going to do a peyote ceremony or an ayahuasca ceremony, be careful because a lot of people are just pretending to be shaman. So basically it was like there was this subtle way she was trying to kind of set herself as the authority over that whole thing. And she wasn't even from any of those bloodlines. And she was like teaching like Lakota, like spirit dance, ghost dance. She was teaching like certain shamanistic traditions that actually came from my ancestors. I have like Lakota ancestry, Potawatomi ancestry, and Aztec ancestry that all goes back to those indigenous cultures. And I also have Shawnee as well. And so so to sit there and hear her, I was getting pissed off, and I was like, why am I getting pissed off? And I was thinking it was my shadow, and I realized no, it was my ancestors. They were pissed off that, the way that she was presenting this back and the way that she was handling the information and how she was trying to assert herself over the indigenous people whom that culture belonged to. And when she was teaching the drumming, she did one with drumming and she did one with rattles. And I remember being drawn to the drums, and everyone else wanted the rattles because it was too loud for them, the drums. So that was interesting. So it was only myself and my husband, who are both from the Nibiru bloodline, who both go back to indigenous ancestry, that liked the drums. Everyone else, it was like too much for them. just for the shamanic journey portion, I mean, they were using drums for other things like clearing the space and dancing, things like that. And that was another thing. I could not get into the ghost dance with these people because it felt wrong. It felt like a betrayal. Like, I don't want to dance with you. Like, you're not my people. Like, that's honestly how I felt. And I'm like, and you're
I had the same experience. When they tried to do an animal dance, it was just awkward. And I was just like, what are these white people doing? They try so hard to get in touch. Some of them, they try so hard to get in touch, but it's not yours. It's not your way.
Right. And that's the thing, like, it's okay, okay, so-called white people from different lineages, whatever lineage you're from, like, and there are a lot of white people that are getting in touch with their lineage. They're getting back into, like, certain lineages that actually belong to them, like, that are from, and I'm not talking about the what's the word I'm looking for? The original Europeans actually were melanated people, but like the so-called white race, like from the Caucasus Mountains and the particular cultures that they had, a lot of them are going back to that. You know, they're going back to those cultures. They're maybe not dealing with the ancestors directly, but they're going back to those cultures. And that's awesome, because each person, regardless of what ancestor you're from, like, we all need to do that. It's okay to have diversity like that, and we need to. People always talk about diversity. You know, no, what the current, you know, Western, you know, Euro Gentile, like, centric society does is create a melting pot. That's not diversity. That's trying to squeeze everybody. That's trying to take the wisdom from every culture as you see fit, and then putting everyone together in a melting pot, and then reappropriating the culture the way you want it to use for your own benefit. That's not everyone. That's not diversity, and that's not everyone going back to their ancestry. So everybody has an ancestry. Go within, find it, connect to it. You know, those archetypes of the major arcana, like in the Kabbalah, in the Sephiroth, and the Qibla, like, everybody has that within them. They have those 144 chakra points within them. So connect to the archetypes that align with your ancestry. Connect to your physical ancestors. Connect to your ancestral powers. Connect to your totems. Everybody has them, you know? So absolutely. And to be honest, like, when I was learning shamanic journeying, I wasn't doing it 100% traditional, only because nobody had ever taught me. It was just kind of, sorry, I think that's my husband's phone. It was just kind of, I was being taken to the shamanic realms, and I was being shown certain things that was very similar to what I learned when I went on that retreat. And I was doing shamanic journeying with my totems and stuff long before I even knew that's what I was really doing. And so later I started using the drums, and it was different. It was definitely way more potent. And then I started being taught other things as well. But yeah, it was just interesting, because when you were talking about that, it made me think about that experience I had, and how I was really upset at, you know, the way that whole thing was handled. And it's funny how you had a similar experience where it was hard for you to kind of get, connect in that way. It's just, it didn't feel right, for sure.
And I felt like a unicorn when I went. I mean, like you said, I was already practicing before I knew I was practicing, but when I went to, you know, one of the workshops or whatever, it felt like being a unicorn. Like, when people were going around the room describing their journeys, I was the person that was having, not only like going super far, like, they're like, oh, you're going to see a level, and then, you know, maybe 10, 12 years down the line after you've been journeying for a long time,
I didn't do that.
level 2 or level 3. And no, here's my first, you know, according to them, here's my first journey, and I'm boom, bam, 3-4 levels in. And they're like, we told you not to go that deep. You don't tell me what to do. Like, that's what I was thinking. And everybody was like, no, what did you see? What did you see? You know what I mean? Like, I felt like the whole class ended up revolving around me. It was weird. But I'll have to share that journey with you, actually.
Maybe we can even do, like, we can definitely talk about one-on-one, but maybe we can even do another interview, or maybe you can share it on your channel, or either way, like, and it's so funny you mention that, because they always do that. They always try to control that, try to water it down. Even when my husband and I were in India, it was the same thing, because the original indigenous people in Indus Valley, like the Dravidians and stuff, you know, they're still very much mistreated, and the incursions that came later on, those are the people that are usually sitting on the top, you know, reteaching everything back to them. You know what I'm saying? And we were
Yeah.
there, we were learning Kriya Yoga, and it was great. But one thing that I peeped was the guy was like, oh, we're only going to teach you this much because, you know, you don't need the rest of it right now because this is going to take you, you know, a few more incarnations. And I'm thinking to myself, that's off. That's wrong. Like, who are you to dictate that? Like, you should make all that information available to people. And then if they're able to succeed in this incarnation, then, you know, who are you to dictate that? And the same thing with Shaman during that workshop was the same thing. Like, she was still trying to dictate. And then when I was having experiences that didn't line up to her own paradigm, she was telling me, oh, well, that must be, you know, just like I share with you over the phone, trying to tell me that my shadow totem was something evil because it was a loss, and trying to tell me that I couldn't see extra dimensional beings in my ancestry, not understanding that my ancestry is very cosmic. It goes way beyond even the 3D avatars, and my cosmic ancestry is still intimately connected to my 3D ancestry. So there was a lot of projections going on there. And then, yes, you know, when I would go really deep and stuff, and I'd start sharing, it was kind of like this, you know, what are you doing there? And anytime anything came up that seemed to come off powerful, then it was always like, oh, well, that's your ego. I'm like, oh, okay, that's another thing I can't.
They always have to have control.
Yeah.
They feel like they have to control everything. And indigenous people know that you're in control of nothing. And it's okay.
Yeah.
It's perfectly okay to not be in control. It's all right. The world goes on.
Cool.
One other thing that I wanted to share, it wasn't a dream. I want to talk about getting in touch with nature just really briefly.
Please, yeah.
That when I had this experience where I was in one of the state parks. No one else was around, and I was in there alone because I like to do that. Go really early before anybody else gets there because people really get on my nerves. Like, they kind of get disrespectful. They start throwing their water bottles and having lunch and doing all kinds of weird stuff out there in those areas. And so I like to go early. And I sat at the base of a tree. And this particular tree, as I was communicating with it, it was saying that we're calling for help. And so this really, when I was hearing it, it made me think of the movie Avatar. And you notice how the people were like all connected to this tree that they were all going to and sitting at. And as I'm sitting with this tree, the tree is telling me that it's calling for help and that the branches aren't the end of it. Like, its leaves and its branches aren't the end of how far it can reach. Like, they literally hold their own frequency. And when it said that it was calling for help, it made me think on that Anunnaki dream, because I had that experience after, like maybe a year after. Like, what, you know what I mean? Like, in a sense, I felt like as if we keep asking for help. We keep saying, someone save us, or when is there going to be an end to this, or we're tired of being persecuted, we're tired of being victimized, and et cetera, et cetera. And we think that we're in this journey alone when we're not. Mother Earth feels what we're going through. Not only is she going through her own thing because of what's happening, but she also feels what the indigenous people of the earth are going through. And she told me, we're calling for help. So think of all the trees that they haven't cut down, and them literally collectively on the same message, asking out into the cosmic realms and calling on our ancestors that lie at their roots, and those that lie in the upper worlds as well, and saying we need help. It's time for redemption. It's time for restitution. It's time for this thing to end. Time for atonement. Like, I just wanted to share that because we're really not alone, and it's such a great time to commune with nature, to begin to plant as many trees as possible, and grow your own food, plant as many plants as possible. It's all here for our healing.
I want to
Inside
take
and
back off of what you were saying about the tree. What you did.
Sorry, what'd you say?
I'm so sorry. This 3G internet. I'm so happy that there's no 5G here. I'm grateful for that, but it creates delays sometimes. I apologize. I wanted to piggyback off of the tree thing because a lot of people don't understand that trees are natural antenna. So natural antenna for the Mother Earth, natural antenna for us. Just like it showed, just like you said, like in Avatar. And that's why they try to cut them down and create these cell tower trees, because it's an artificial tree that actually disrupts our natural auric fields and the natural ley lines and vortexes of the earth. And actually, it can keep us from even astral traveling efficiently because it's actually geared to lower our vibration and disconnect us. Whereas trees are natural antennas. So that's why, you know, Siddhartha Gautama, for example, was like meditating under a tree. You know, Yeshaya the Essene did the same thing. So trees, it's very powerful to connect under a tree. I did that in India. We don't have a lot of trees in Egypt, but in India, I was able to do it. I went to a natural site and I just sat under the tree and I was just connecting and meditating. And it was funny, all the ants that were there, I was like, I communicated with them. I said, look, I'm not trying to disrupt your area. Like, I'm just going to create this little circle. And it was cool because the ants, like, they stayed outside of the circle. You know, I didn't disrupt them. They didn't disrupt me. I make sure I don't step on them or anything when I'm walking around. Just more in tune to nature in that sense. Like, I don't just kill things arbitrarily just because it's a bug or something like that. And so I was just kind of talking to them and I was feeling the collective consciousness conversations of nature that take place. And then I actually felt when the Earth Mother was like, it's time for you to leave, basically, like, and I was like, okay, you know, and I got up and I left. I have my staff and stuff, which I don't have anymore. It's actually in storage, but it was just like, just to kind of, you know, piggyback off what you're saying, that trees are antennas. It's really the best place we can meditate, and we should spend as much time out in nature as possible. And like you said, you know, growing our own food and stuff like that, but even meditating is best to take place, you know, near water, or, you know, sitting or standing on the ground, or, you know, up against a tree. These are all natural conduits that are going to connect us.
Absolutely. And we need to just trust. We've been taught to distrust. We've been taught to distrust ourselves, all the way down to our natural selves. And that's the very thing that we need to trust in as we move forward. Mm-hmm. Is to trust in ourselves and trust that you're right. And I feel like I want to say you're right because so many people think, well, this is contrary to everything that I know. This is contrary to the world that we live in. If you're here, if you're having a calling, if something is constantly coming up in your mind to do something, you're right. Do that thing. Trust yourself. It's the largest act of rebellion that you can commit right about now, is trusting yourself. That is the revolution. The return to who we truly are is the revolution. Okay?
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to end too, Keyia. Did you have anything else you wanted to? No. I'm good. When you said that, it was like this powerful kind of pulse went out, and I was like, ooh, okay, that's a good spot. Because that just like, you're like, yeah, you know, this is what's up. Cool. Thank you so much, for coming on my channel. Thank you so much for doing this interview. And once again, guys, and please, subscribe to Keyia's channel, follow her, hit the notification bell. Links are going to be in the drop-down menu for her business, her herbal business, her shamanic healing business. So definitely check her out. Thanks again, Keyia. And hey, maybe if you're up for it, we could do an interview in the future with something, another important topic. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been a joy and a pleasure to just, to talk and commune with like minds. I love that. And I like your energy and everything. And yeah, I definitely want to do it in the future. Cool. Definitely. Yeah, me too. Awesome. All right, Keyia. Well, you have a beautiful day. Thanks again. And like I said, guys, make sure to check Keyia out. All right. Take care. Shalom, everybody.